If there's anything that BMW and Intel and AMD has taught me, is that if you have a 5 series and a 7 series, it's all about that 9 series. That's why today we're taking a look at the NZXT's brand new H9 flow. If I'm correct, it's just like the 710 flow, but bigger. I'm gonna be doing a build in this here, this month, next month, somewhere. So I wanna unbox it and kind of get a look at it before I get to, so the Flow series, it's kind of NZXT's answer to a problem that a lot of people had with their just the standard like H10, H510, the 710, the Elite and all that, was the fact that it didn't have great airflow. So they went, you want airflow? You got airflow. And they drilled about 55 million holes in the front of their cases. And so now what we have here is the H9 Elite. I thought it was a Flow, but I guess it's an Elite. So now we're gonna see what happens when they put glass where the Flow panel used to be. Now, if you're wondering what the Elite versus the Flow and all that stuff is, Flow is basically just that, airflow optimized. The Elite gives you RGB fans already pre-installed. It gives you glass or tempered glass side panels, typically where you would find those flow plates. But this is gonna be like the biggest case that NZXT has made in quite a while. Remember when they made like the Phantom and they made, what was the other? Oh, the Switch. I had a Switch 810. This is gonna be a nice one to take a look at because they kind of jumped on that trendy train of let's make everything more of a cube and let's have things against the motherboard wall and all that. But it should allow for pretty decent airflow because of the fact that they're gonna be pulling in air from the backside of where the motherboard is. Now we all know who sort of started that trend, okay? Y'all are saying it and you're typing it already. But it's one of those things that if it's working and people are liking it, then I guess you kind of come up with your own take on it. Probably a familiar design. Stop me if you've seen it already. Now, yes, it probably looks an awful lot like a Lian-Li 011 Dynamic. And you know what? You'd be right. But this has the NZXT Flow touches on it. For instance, someone went crazy with a drill. So, whereas this was typically in the past a solid panel except for right where the intakes would be, they were just like, you know what? Drill holes everywhere. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull this off. This is the same type of flow panel that you would see on the front of like the H7 flow, the H5 flow. Giant openings, giant holes. That way it's not obstructive at all. You do have, the entire thing has got a filter in it. So any intake on the back is getting filtered. You also have this support chassis right here, which is, again, very reminiscent of another case on the market. This is where you would mount your 2.5-inch drives. You can mount 1, 2, 3, 4 of them. They even give you a place right here to be able to mount like your controller, pass-through cables, although you wouldn't pass cables this way because this is flush with the case. This, as you can see, has 3 pre-installed RGB intake fans. Check out the depth though. If you want to put a radiator in here, you can put it on this side, have it pull air through, but you could put a pretty thick rad there, up to like a 45 millimeter if you needed to or wanted to, without any interference with the back panel right there. So that's kind of neat to see. Very thick tempered glass too, look at that. And it's like beveled cut. That's kind of neat right there, a little beveled cut. That way it meets right up against this glass right here. So it's just glass on glass with the 45 cut on both of those, which makes them made up with each other with no frame right there. But one of the things that this case kind of addresses is just the size necessary for modern graphics cards. Although this case was in development before the 40 series cards ever launched, because it takes a while to develop and tool and manufacture a case. I think this will be able to fit a Strix card for sure. Maybe even that behemoth of a gigabyte card, but we don't have one of those. But look at this, giant pass-through hole right here to be able to run cables and stuff if you need. But if you look at where the graphics or the power supply goes, it doesn't mount down here on the bottom. It mounts up. So that allows you to have extra drive cages and such. So this is a drive cage right here, which you can take out if you don't need, which I would probably take out. These are 3.5-inch drive cage, so you can fit 2 3.5-inch drives in there. You open that up, as you can see, you have a lot of space down here now. You could also put a pump or something down here if you needed to. So if we take out these thumb screws on the back side, so those can come out, but as you can see, with them cable managed in there. I can't take the bracket out all the way. But you could take this out, mount your fans, mount your radiator, get everything attached to this, route it back through, and then put it in. So it's just allowing you to be able to work on the chassis or the mounting of this outside of the case before getting it in there, which admittedly is super easy. It's just the fans are already zip tied down, so that's, you know, I would have to remove those straps, which are right here on the side, all these Velcro straps right here, and that's where everything's kind of mounted down to, and I'll show you that. This is designed for the cables to mount along this piece rather than here. So this piece comes out right here. All right, and once those two screws are out, then this is actually on a hinge. That way you can open up and access your SSDs or whatever that are on here. If you want to take this out entirely while you're working on it so it's not flopping around, you pop out the tab on the top and then you lift it out of the bottom because it has then the hinge right there. So this removes. And then here's the part that makes it also elite, is the fact that it comes with the RGB fans and the pre-installed cam controller here. You can see that we have some splitters already pre-installed because we do have 5 more fans available to us. So technically there are, what is this, 4? Yeah, there are technically, well, there's 3 fan headers, and then you've got RGB. So here's RGB 1, 2, and 3 right there, and fan 1. And then we have fan 2 and fan 3. And then technically 4, 5, 6. So technically we have 6 RGB channels and 3 fan channels on here. But as you can see, we have a splitter pre-installed on this. So on the top, we have 1 plugged in already that's going to the rear. That's the non-RGB fan on the back, with 2 more available to it with the splitter. And on the bottom, we have just 1 header attached to a triple splitter right here. So you could use this for running, if you were gonna do like 3 fans on the bottom or a radiator intake or something, you could plug them into that 1 channel. And then we have the other one right here, which is on channel 3, running to another splitter that is then controlling these 3 fans right here. So with this being pre-installed, it's kind of nice because now it gives you a place that if you're using at least NZXT products with their headers, then you can plug in additional fan strips, additional RGB headers for fans, and then the fans themselves, and have 1 standalone piece of software that's tied in with your case to be able to control all of that. But again, that's specific to NZXT. If you decide to go with other fan controllers or fan headers or fan types or whatever, then this is something you're paying for with the Elite that you're not going to be using, which means you might want to start considering the Flow at that point. I don't want to say this is an O11 copy, but it kind of is. But you know what? There's a lot of people out there that I think are hungry for a case that's similar, but maybe isn't from Lian-Li. So it is what it is, you know? You can't fault NZXT for going, the O11 is very popular with that whole layout. What would we do with it? So you get these NZXT touches on a case that's already proven to be very popular. Okay, this is for the controller right here. So this has to get plugged into your motherboard. If you want to obviously control this, which you need to with the NZXT cam software. So there's that. This right here should be HD audio. Yep, I don't know why people still include this. There's gotta be a better interface for the analog. The reason why I don't like HD audio, and I've seen people ask this all the time, is like, you never plug it into your systems, you always say you never use it. It's because this cable, even though it is somewhat shielded, it's gonna run along power cables no matter how much you try. And what you end up getting more often than not, is popping and cracking and stuff in your audio if you plug in analog headphones to that. So I personally would still just run them to the back, you know, of your motherboard. But it's very difficult to run these without having them have to run alongside power in some way. Anyway, here's your SATA power for the controller box that's pre-installed. Here is your USB-C plug that goes into your motherboard. So this gives you, obviously your USB-C connectivity, which is on the top right here. And then a pre-installed bundle of wires, as you can see. Just might as well leave those. These are already plugged in and wired to the fans. This is why I couldn't pull that adapter out, because it's zip tied all tight right here. So if I were to loosen that zip tie and unplug those, then the whole thing would come out. Now for cable management, you can see you've got these straps right here. And this goes right along the piece of metal that these fans are shrouded by. So this is kind of nice only in the sense that once the back panel's on, it's just gonna pull air right through those vents. Now the back panel being fully vented, that obviously is gonna be needed because this is where your power supply is gonna pull in air. And then I guess it's just not bad practice to have extra ventilation. Now, whether that's gonna turn into intake holes or exhaust holes is gonna depend on how many intake or exhaust fans you have in this system. So if we kind of take a look at the front side now, you can see we have room down here on the bottom for 3 120 millimeter or 140 millimeter fans. There's plenty of room here to also turn that into a 360 or a 420 radiator. So I would want to take advantage of the updraft, the convection. So I would have fans pulling in from the bottom through the rad, and there's plenty of airflow in the bottom. These stand off like an inch, like a solid 20 millimeters or so from the floor. It's filtered, as you can see. If you don't want it to be filtered, that'll just help with the airflow. You could pull that out, no filtration, and then it will just pull in through those same flow holes, the giant holes that they have in their cases now, to be able to pull in air through the bottom. Have it push air to the top, and you can see right here that we do have a bracket available to us to be able to install fans up here. Because of the solid glass right here, the air has to come up through those fans, hang a hard left, and then hit the wall right here, and then take a hard right to exhaust out of these holes right here. It's kind of like NZXT got themselves kind of in, not trouble with, it's just, they had to redesign it because it wasn't the greatest airflow in the front of the case. They just moved it to the top. Personally, I would have said, screw the glass on the top entirely and give us an entire flow panel on the top. That way we would have had great intake on the bottom and great exhaust on the top. This kind of a hard left, hard right, you know anytime air has to make a turn, especially a hard 90 like this, and there's not a lot of gap right here, that's gonna hurt airflow. Now, if you've got all of these intakes on the bottom, and you've got intakes right here, and the only exhaust you really have is this kind of a non-flow optimized top piece, well, now your back panel that we just talked about is turning into an exhaust because of positive pressure. Just solid glass panel, which I would have personally just rather had seen this be airflow. I bet you that's the way the flow version is. More than likely, that's the way the H9 flow will be. I think the glass panel here on the side and the front's enough. Let it just still be a flow panel on the top. Here is the tray as it removes. And this is all like plexi, which is neat. Just to kind of, I guess it's gonna look like it's kind of floating there once all this is off, which is a nice thing. These are the only holes you have for air to exhaust. So I would highly recommend removing this filter. One, as an exhaust, you don't need it to be filtered. And two, just so you can get as much airflow at the top of this as possible. This is where if I had two of these cases, honestly, like if I had a Flow and an Elite here on hand, I would be swapping parts between them. I would probably put the Flow panel on here and call it a day. And here's the other thing. If you're gonna put a radiator on here, because you want dual rad, 360 on the bottom, 360 on the top, that radiator is gonna add a ton of resistance. So these fans are gonna be working. You would need some seriously static pressure optimized fans to overcome the amount of resistance a radiator is gonna have on one side of it, and then the crazy bend that the airflow has to take. You've, again, only got about 20 millimeters of space between the glass and the bottom side. You can't mount fans right here. Even if you got thin fans and put them here, they're just gonna blow right into the glass. There'd be no gap. So you have to leave this air cushion here. Everything must be mounted on the inside of the case. Now, one thing we're noticing here is with this hole right here, the air not only has to make it up, out, it can go this way back through those vents as well. Which I guess once we do a build in this, we're just gonna have to test it. As long as there's enough volume here and the fans can overcome the crazy, because now the fans have to bring the air up, push it sideways, and then split it two directions again. As long as your fans have a good enough amount of static pressure, and you're not gonna be able to push-pull it. I mean, I guess you could. It'd be hanging like this low inside of here, and they are offset a little bit, but you have this piece now, which is also designed to hide the cables. This is a very NZXT-esque, like stapled in all their case designs. You can only go so far before you hit this. So you probably are not gonna get push-pull. A lot of little things in here though. I do like the plexi right here, which looks like a smoked out piece of plexiglass. I guess just a little bit of a nice design aesthetic. A lot of neat touches that NZXT has kind of brought from their cases over to this very staple design. The 011 Dynamic was kind of the first case to really make this popular, so I just keep coming back to that. All right, so what comes in the box? What's in the box? Okay, screws. We're for your motherboard standoffs, radiator mounts, fan mounts, all that sort of stuff. Fan screws, power supply screws are all sitting right there. And then we need to see what's in here. This is gonna probably be a radiator bracket or something. Why is it so long? Oh, okay. So this is just a replacement top piece. Where if you don't want to go with the 360, because that's a 360 mount up there now, you could go with a 280. So this is two 140 millimeter fans to give you a 280 mount. I guess that's kind of nice too, because without having to have the single bracket that has the separate rails and stuff going down it, that would actually take away some airflow to a 360. So by having a separate bracket, kind of surprised they did this. This just sort of increases the cost per unit when only one of them is going to be used potentially. I say potentially, if you keep it and hang on to it and don't lose it like I do with case parts, if you ever need to change your design, I personally would run a 360 on the top just because more fans up there, the better, right? 140 fans are gonna be better at airflow in a less static pressure area like this, area of high pressure right here. The 120s and more of them is gonna be better at pushing air through than a slower RPM 140 millimeter fan. So 140s will be good at moving air, higher CFM, lower static pressure. But the 120 is gonna be better at static pressure and more of them. Man, there's just so much going on here and so many possibilities. I'm a little overwhelmed. I need to take a break. Take your work and gaming experience to the next level with the ViewSonic XG340C 2K ultra-wide high-end display. The XG340C 2K 34-inch 100Hz ultra-wide monitor features HDMI 2.1, AMD FreeSync Premium Pro, a 1000R curved screen, VESA display HDR 400 and 1 millisecond response time for the ultimate immersive gaming experience. And take control of multiple devices with KVM support while also taking full control of your display via the Elite Display Controller. To see the full list of specs and features, follow the sponsored link in the description below. I know it sounds like I'm giving NZXT kind of a hard time of just going, way to copy the O11 dynamic. Lian-Li did that on Twitter themselves, actually. No, this is not the first time we've seen a brand really sort of take on this design. But what's nice to see, and I've said this a million times on our React series to your systems, I got to the point where I just stopped including O11 dynamic builds in that React series because they were everywhere. Like the O11 dynamic, in my personal opinion, as someone who's built in it now more than once, my daughter's build included, is just so done. I'm just happy to see another variant based on that overall layout. There's only so many ways you could design a case, people. There's only so many ways. This is just the latest one that people have really kind of bitten onto. I'm happy to see something else come to market. And so the NZXT H9 Elite comes with all the tempered glass side panels and the built-in controller and the RGB fans pre-installed. You've got the flow variant, which has the better flow on the top, still has a glass on the front and on the side, same back panel with all the flow. I'm gonna be building in this and it'll be nice to see exactly how it turns out. Now, obviously when it comes to graphics card fitment, like I said, there's no issue at all fitting a 4080 air-cooled card, or 4090 even air-cooled card in there. That's a Strix card, lots of room. But what we're dealing with here is potentially an issue now with cable length sticking out to the side panel. I also have, I think it will make it, because once it's seated, it'll be down just about another centimeter. I think we'll have enough clearance there. But I do have the cable mod 90-degree adapters coming, which will help. My only problem is, will the 90-degree adapter impact here? Because as you can see, that's recessed. So will it just push into there?
You pick which direction when you order them?
Well, I don't want it to go up. That'll just look stupid. I know it's reversible and we have both coming, but that's just the other side of things you have to consider when it comes to these types of builds. But I think up would actually be just fine because then it can go from here up right into this little hidden area there. This slit, I forgot to mention, this is in every single one of the NZXT cases because of the fact that this is also a place where you're supposed to be able to mount something to it, typically like a reservoir mount, but I think that's just become a design feature of all their cases now because they all have it. I wouldn't necessarily mount a reservoir there. I would probably go with a fan mount reservoir on the front right there. Plenty of room to water cool this. You can do custom water loop in this for days. A little bit on the busy side of things happening in terms of the bracketry and stuff, but overall, seems like a pretty well built case. When it comes to the pricing, yep, that's the price, all right. If you want to see the price, you have to look in the description. Whether or not this case is worth it to you though, I guess that really depends. I could see this case lasting someone years. It's got plenty of room for a big power supply if you needed one. As you can see, as soon as you take out the bracket right here, you have all this space for the cable management. Not something you have to worry about. You have plenty of room to just ball it up, zip tie it or Velcro it and just stick it down here. I don't know how many people are running 3.5-inch drives anymore. Maybe if you're running big storage, you'd be able to just leave that in there and still have a pretty decent amount of space to the left of it, as you can see. Over here, plenty of thickness for a radiator on this side. So it's like a stealth rad where you could just have the tubes kind of coming through the top right here, or on the bottom, you can see there's plenty of gap. What a lot of manufacturers forget to do is give you room to pass your tubes through. And you gotta think about that. So you could have a stealth mounted rad with tubes coming out of it and looking all pretty. Plenty of room for a 360 on the bottom, room for a 360 on the top, as long as the airflow is decent enough, which hopefully it will be able to go both directions. I think it's a solid case, I really do. But the price, it's a little bit of a premium price. The Elite product is a premium. Now the Flow is a bit cheaper. And I personally would see myself choosing the Flow over the Elite just for its value. The Elite does add quite a bit of price to the case. But I think you can't technically go wrong with either of them when it comes to the overall build quality. The steel is very solid. This is the flimsiest piece in here, and it's not doing anything but giving you something to strap your cables to. It's not even structural in any way. The metal on here is very solid. The powder coating is very uniform. The texture's nice. It does come in white and black. I think the white builds always look nice in these types of cases. I like the fact that there's no frame right here. I like that you have the glass meets glass right there, which is something that we sort of saw with the Height Y60. I just think it's this classy, like if you were into super fine no bezels on monitors, this would be the equivalent of that. So from this side here, you're not gonna see any metal structure, and it looks premium. It's the only thing I can say. A lot of people now are finally looking at upgrading their cases and stuff. As prices continue to be very difficult to allow people to upgrade their systems, a lot of folks are finally just upgrading their old cases because it gives them the feel of like a new system. They get to transfer over all their stuff, so they get the satisfaction of building a computer, even though it's the same hardware, taking an opportunity to re-cable manage, maybe deep clean your system as you're moving into a new case. Cases are something that a lot of people like to really save money on by going super low end. But cases are something that can grow with your system and move along and multiple builds with it. So I feel like it's the kind of case that you could use multiple iterations of your system, plenty of room and expandability where you don't feel like you need to change your case if you change your hardware. It's not like, oh, I've got this really nice graphics card now and I've got this really cheap case. Now I feel like my system looks kind of janky. That's not the case. I like it. I like the build quality. I'm looking forward to building in it. I feel like there's a lot of possibilities with this. And so that's where you guys need to sound off down below. How would you build in this case? I guess the first question would be this or the O11? If you choose this, what would you do with it? What kind of hardware would you throw in here? Would you do a water-cooled build, AIO build, high-end air-cooled build? A high-end air-cooled build personally should be in the Flow, in my opinion. But anyway, thanks for watching, guys. As always, we'll see you in the next one.